welcome back to another video on my channel. Today's video is going to be about a case that I heard about several years ago, but I never thought to talk about on my channel until one of you guys requested it. And I do have to say that this case is so insanely interesting, and I'm super excited to talk about it with you guys today. Now, I was going to save this for the end of the video, but I figured a lot of people don't watch till the very end. I did just want to say that if you guys had any requests of videos or topics that are similar to this one, as well as topics that involve extraterrestrials or like paranormal hauntings and things along those lines, please leave them in the comments because I'm trying to plan out the next 6 months and I would really like to kind of focus more on that kind of thing. So if you have any requests, please leave them in the comments. But with that all being said, let's get right into today's video because I really think that you guys are going to enjoy this one. This case started in July of 1954 when an airplane full of passengers touched down at the Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan. Now, I do believe that this plane was flying in from somewhere in Europe. However, the specifics of that are not confirmed or verified anywhere. I couldn't find the specifics of that. However, it did appear that most of the people who were coming off of this plane were traveling for business, and a lot of them looked as if they were Japanese or traveling back home to Japan, maybe from traveling or being on business, whereas the rest of the passengers did appear to be European. None of the passengers on this flight or getting off this flight displayed any strange behavior or anything like that. Nothing really caught any of the people who worked in the airport's attention until one of the passengers tried to go through airport security. Now, nothing about this man's appearance really struck out to anybody. He looked like he was a businessman. He had Caucasian appearance. He had a beard, and again, he just looked like your average businessman. His native language was French, but he did speak several other languages. That included Japanese. But what really stood out about this man was not his appearance or the way he was behaving, because again, he just appeared to be very normal and was behaving very normal. But what did strike airport security as very strange was this man's passport. The passport that this man had handed over to the airport officials did appear to be an official document. It didn't look like anything that was, made or illegal or anything like that. It did look like your average passport. It was in very good condition and even had older travel stamps from other countries, as well as older travel stamps from previous times when this man had traveled to Japan. But what was so strange about this passport was the man's home country, which was stated in the passport as a place called Taured. Now, think about this really hard because nobody in the airport had ever heard of Taured. If it was an airport, you would think that the officials who worked there had seen people from every single country. But at first they weren't doubting that this man's passport was fake. They just wanted to kind of pull him aside and interrogate him just to make sure that everything was normal. So they pulled him into the interrogation room, and this is when they asked the man to provide more official pieces of identification, which the man was able to provide, and all of his pieces of ID did state that this man was from a country called Taured. Along with the official documents that this man was able to provide to the airport officials, he also provided currency from Taured as well as banknotes. Now again, the people who worked in the airport who were interrogating this man were trained officials, and not even they could find anything wrong with any of this man's identification or anything like that. There was nothing really screaming to them that any of his belongings were counterfeit or anything along those lines, and they couldn't find anything to actually state or prove that this man's documents were not real. However, did not change the fact that nobody in the airport working that day had ever heard of Taured. They were even calling out other people who had worked in the airport. Nobody had heard of this country. But as they continued to interrogate this man, he continued to grow more and more frustrated. He stated that Taured had been around for thousands of years and that he had even previously traveled to Japan from Taured in the past, which again was confirmed by the stamps in his passport. However, that didn't change the fact that nobody can confirm whether or not this country actually exists. What else to do? The people who were interrogating this man went and got a map of the world, and they brought the map back and they placed it down in front of the man and asked him to point out where his home country was. The man seemed very confident at first, but after looking at the map for a few minutes, he became visibly confused. He pointed to a small area between France and Spain, which is the Principality of Andorra, and he said that that is where his home country of Taured should have been. After interrogation, the man had said that he had been traveling from Taured to Japan several times that year for work, which was again confirmed in his passport by the travel stamps. However, the business that he said that he was working with in Japan obviously didn't ever hear of this man, and the company that he said that he was working for in Taured obviously didn't exist. He had also said that he had made a reservation at a specific hotel, but when the airport officials called this hotel, the hotel had no reservations under that man's name. Things in this case just continue to grow stranger and stranger, and as he was getting interrogated and things just weren't adding up, the man started to grow more and more irritated. Obviously, traveling is exhausting in itself, but to be interrogated about the country that you're coming from is probably absolutely exhausting. So knowing that the man was growing more and more irritated, and after interrogating him for several hours, airport officials decided that they were going to offer to put him up in a hotel room for the night to kind of rest, and then they would get him again in the morning and kind of figure out where this all was going. So once they offered this to this man, he did agree. And the way that this was going to work is they were going to put him into this hotel room, they would feed him, and they would have 2 immigration officers standing at the door on guard for the entire night until they came to retrieve him the next day. So once the man was put into this hotel room, he was given dinner, and then he told the immigration officers that he was going to go to sleep. The immigration officers had been guarding this man's room all night. They never left the door. However, when officials showed up the next day to retrieve this man and kind of get this situation sorted out, the man was nowhere to be found. The strange man was completely gone from his hotel room, and so were all of his belongings. But what is even stranger about this particular situation is officials had kept his ID and things along those lines in their custody to kind of study it. And just in case, they did turn out to not be official documents and anything like that, they do hold things like that in custody overnight or until whenever this person would be released. And it is said that his ID and anything that was being held by officers in custody had also just completely vanished. The officers who had been set outside of this man's door were obviously questioned really intensely, but they stood by their story saying that nobody had been in or out of that room the entire night and they hadn't heard anything out of the ordinary. Now there was one other possible exit in that room, which was a ledgeless window which was 6 stories high. So obviously making an escape out of an exit like that is very unlikely, and it is likely that if the man had escaped through that window, he would have been injured if not completely deceased. And as you can probably guess, that is it. After this, they never were able to track this man down again. They were never able to track down any of his belongings, and they were never able to verify where this country of Taured came from. It is not a real country. It does appear to be completely, made up. But there was more to this story, or it feels like there was more to this story, and nobody who knew about this man or who had came into contact with him was ever given any answers about where he went, where he came from, how his belongings just vanished. They were all just completely left with all of these questions. How did he vanish from his room? Where is Taured? Where did he actually come from? Did Taured ever exist? This case is so interesting and I have so many questions, and it just keeps my brain going and also makes it feel like it's going to explode all at the same time. So now let's talk about some of the theories that people have about this specific case. And unfortunately, that's all that I think we're going to get on this case. I don't think we will ever be given answers. I don't think we'll ever know anything more. Of course, people can theorize what they think happened in this case, but I don't think we will ever have any concrete answers of what was actually going on with this man and what exactly or where exactly Taured is, if it does even exist. So let's get this theory completely out of the way first, because it is boring and there isn't really too much to say about it. Many people believe that this case could just be completely made up. There's no truth to it, and it is nothing more than a story. Now, like I mentioned, I think this is a very boring theory and I don't want to dive into it too much, but of course I did need to mention it for the purpose of the video. A more interesting theory that I came across on this case several times is that many people believe that this man from Taured was an interdimensional traveler. Maybe this man had come from a reality that was extremely similar to ours, but obviously had its differences. Possibly during this man's trip from Taured to Japan, at some point he had somehow crossed from his reality into ours, and maybe he hadn't even noticed that he had crossed into a different reality because they were so similar until he was put into the interrogation room and being accused of making up his country that was his home. Maybe at some point during this man's flight from Taured to Japan, he somehow crossed realities and he didn't even realize that he was in a completely different reality until he was put in the interrogation room and being accused of making up his home country. Many people also believe, along with this theory, that when the man was put into that hotel room, he somehow crossed back into his own reality and all of his belongings just disappeared from this one and ended up back with him, kind of, putting the realities back on track. Go even deeper in that theory is many people believe that if this was what happened, the man would have woken up in his own reality, possibly in the hotel room that he had originally booked, and he would have just felt like this was some kind of fever dream. He might be really confused and wondering what is going on, and he might be thinking about it his entire life, but maybe it was just explained away as some weird dream. I personally strongly believe in time travel and alternate dimensions and things along those lines, so I do think that this is a possibility within this case because there is several other cases online, even if they're just short little things, of people claiming to have crossed between separate realities or time traveling or things along those lines that just don't make any sense. I'm sure we've all seen online those photos that are said to be dated way, way, way back when, and you can see a man in the photo who is like holding an iPhone or like doesn't dress as if he is from that time but is dressed more modern as if he is time traveling. And I do know that some of these pictures obviously are fake, but I also think there's a strong possibility that, some of them could be authentic. Another theory that crossed my mind in this case is that maybe this man was some kind of spy. Now obviously it would be pretty stupid to put your country of origin as a country that doesn't even exist if you are a spy. However, I did just want to mention that in today's video because that was something that crossed my mind while researching this case. Another theory in this case that I think is worth the mention but doesn't really make sense is that many people believe that this was all a misunderstanding and that there was some kind of language barrier between the man from Taured as well as the officials in the airport. However, personally, that doesn't make any sense because where would all of these documents from Taured come from? The airport officials would be used to looking at passports all day, every day, so I really don't know how that confusion could have happened. But guys, that brings us to the end of today's video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!